The legal document hit my glass coffee table with a sound that seemed to echo through my entire penthouse. Not a thud, more like a crack, the kind you hear right before something structural gives way. My mother's manicured fingers released the thick petition, and in that half second before it settled, I caught sight of the words, emergency guardianship and mental instability, typed in cold, official font. My brother Nathan stood by my granite kitchen island, reeking of bourbon and barely contained panic. My parents, Deborah and Victor, positioned themselves like they were closing a business deal, not visiting their daughter at 11 p.m. on a Tuesday night. They'd let themselves in with the emergency keys I'd given them years ago, back when I still believed family meant safety. "We need $65,000, Alexandria," my father said, his voice carrying none of the warmth you'd expect from a parent asking their child for help. "Nathan's margin call is due Friday." The word no was barely out of my mouth when my mother moved. No screaming, no begging, just that smooth reach into her Prada bag and the document landing between us like a declaration of war. "We're doing this for your own good," she whispered, and her eyes had that same cold calculation I'd seen her use on business rivals. "We're taking control of your assets tomorrow morning. The hearing's at 9 a.m. My name is Alexandria. I'm 30 years old and a senior architect at one of Chicago's top firms. This is the story of how I discovered I'd been living in my own house while my family squatted in my inheritance. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. I'd love to know who's part of our community." The door clicked shut behind them. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was the kind of quiet that comes right after an explosion, when your ears are still ringing and you're checking to see what's still standing. I didn't chase them down the hallway, didn't throw anything or collapse on the couch in tears. I walked to the door and engaged the deadbolt. Then the secondary security lock I'd installed 3 months ago when Nathan first started asking oddly specific questions about my bonus structure. I also took their emergency keys from the hook by the door and dropped them into my safe. They would never walk into my home uninvited again. The petition sat on my coffee table like a live grenade. I didn't pick it up yet. Didn't need to read the details to understand what it meant. My parents were trying to have me declared mentally incompetent so they could legally control my money, not borrow it, not ask for it, control it. I poured myself a glass of ice water. My hands were completely steady. The only thing sweating in that room was the condensation on the glass. Here's what you need to understand about me. I design buildings that can withstand Category 5 hurricanes. When a load-bearing wall cracks, I don't panic. I evacuate, shore up the structure, and redesign. My parents had just cracked the foundation of our relationship, and I had exactly 9 hours and 45 minutes before the courts opened to turn my financial life into a fortress. I carried my laptop to the dining table and got to work. First, credit bureaus, Equifax, TransUnion, Experian. I initiated total security freezes on all 3. Without the PIN I'd just created, a 20-digit code that existed nowhere but in my memory. No one could open a credit card, take out a loan, or start a utility account in my name. 3 clicks, 3 confirmations. Frozen solid. Next, the banks. My parents had my old passwords. They knew my social security number, my first pet's name, the street I grew up on. All the standard security questions I'd set up when I was 22 and still thought they were normal parents who'd never weaponized my trust. I changed every password to random 30-character strings, updated every security question. Mother's maiden name? I typed in the serial number of my laptop. First elementary school? The chemical formula for reinforced concrete. Let them try to guess that. Then I moved the money. I opened a high-yield account I'd set up years ago for a potential firm buyout, an account they didn't know existed. The wire transfer screen loaded. "Are you sure you want to transfer $112,000? I hit enter. The progress bar filled. Green. Complete. But I didn't stop there. I logged into my company's payroll portal and removed my direct deposit information. If they somehow managed to freeze my main account tomorrow, my next paycheck, $8,200, wouldn't land in their trap. It would sit safely in payroll limbo until I redirected it. By 12:03 a.m., I'd made myself invisible in my own financial system, a ghost with a 7-figure net worth and a family that wanted to lock me up to steal it. I sat back. the screen's blue glow reflecting off the windows overlooking Lake Michigan. The city lights blinked, indifferent and beautiful, while I turned myself into a fortress. Then I looked at the guardianship petition again, really looked at it this time. They were going to tell a judge I was manic, reckless, unable to manage my own affairs. I glanced at the logs of my last hour's activity. Every action precise, methodical, strategic. This wasn't mania. This was a hostile takeover defense. The Chicago wind hit my reinforced windows with a low moan. Usually that sound helps me sleep. Tonight it sounded like a warning. I opened a new spreadsheet and labeled it Family Liabilities. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for just a second before I started typing. Nathan's DUI, 2019, $12,000. Mom's emergency cruise, 2021, $8,000. Dad's country club arrears, 2022, $15,000. The list grew, row after row of bailouts and loans that were never repaid. The total blinked at the bottom of the screen, $214,000 over 7 years. I stared at that number. Why had I paid it? Why had I kept writing checks while they called me cold, ungrateful, distant? It wasn't generosity. It wasn't even love. Not really. It was the elephant. You know that story? They chain elephants when they're babies. The baby pulls and pulls but isn't strong enough to break free. Eventually, it stops trying. It learns it's trapped. Years later, when that elephant is fully grown and could rip the stake out of the ground with one tug, it doesn't. It stays put because it still believes it's weak. That was me. My parents had trained me from age 6 that my worth was transactional. Good grades earned dinner without criticism. Silence earned peace. Money earned a momentary pause in the passive-aggressive commentary about my career choices, my apartment, my life. I wasn't writing those checks to help them. I was paying ransom for my own existence. I looked at the petition again. Mental incompetence. The chain snapped. I wasn't the baby elephant anymore. I was the architect who just designed a 70-story skyscraper that could withstand a magnitude 8 earthquake. And I'd finally realized the foundation I'd been standing on was rotten. You don't repair a rotten foundation. You condemn the building. I closed the laptop. Dawn was starting to break over the lake, painting the water in shades of steel and pink. I picked up my phone. I had one call to make before court opened. Not to a therapist, not to a lawyer, not yet. I dialed Aunt Olivia. The next morning, my phone started buzzing at 7 a.m., a relentless, angry vibration against my desk. I watched the notifications pile up but didn't answer. Nathan, Deborah, Victor. Then the extended family joined in. My mother had apparently sent a group text to everyone we knew, painting me as unstable and in crisis. Aunt Sarah. Honey, your mom says you're having a breakdown. Please call us. Cousin Ryan. Dude, you okay? Nate said you threatened to hurt yourself. I scrolled through them with no expression. This was their offense. Painting the narrative before I could even get to the courthouse. Weaponizing my silence. Turning my competence into mania and my boundaries into paranoia. A voicemail from my father, timestamp 2 a.m. His voice was thick with scotch. You think that money is yours, Alexandria? Who paid for your piano lessons? Who drove you to math camp? That money is mine. It's a return on my investment. You don't steal from the people who made you. I saved the voicemail, backed it up to 3 different cloud servers. That's when it finally clicked. To most people, a child is a person. To a narcissist, a child is an asset class. They don't see autonomy. They see equity. My salary wasn't my earnings. It was their dividend. My refusal to pay wasn't a boundary. It was a breach of contract. They genuinely didn't believe they were stealing. They believed they were liquidating an asset they owned. The realization didn't hurt. It cauterized the wound. It burned away the last lingering hope that maybe, just maybe, they were worried about me. They weren't worried. They were just afraid their stock was crashing. I picked up my phone and dialed the only person in my family who'd been excommunicated for refusing to play along, Aunt Olivia. I was wondering when you'd call, she said, her voice dry as desert sand. They filed for guardianship. I know. Your mother posted a prayer request on Facebook about your mental health crisis 20 minutes ago. A pause. Be at my office in an hour. Bring coffee, black. An hour later, I walked into Aunt Olivia's office. Not a home, but a weapon disguised as a forensic accounting firm. 42nd floor of a steel tower in the Loop, smelling of burnt coffee and billable hours. The receptionist didn't ask my name. She just buzzed me through. Olivia stood by the window, looking out at the same gray skyline I'd watched all night. She didn't look like my father's sister. She looked like a predator who'd eaten the rest of the pack and was still hungry. Charcoal suit that cost more than my first car. No hug, no platitudes. She just pointed at the leather chair across from her desk. Let me see it. I slid the petition across the mahogany. She put on reading glasses and flipped through it. The silence was absolute. I watched her eyes scan the lies. Manic, reckless, danger to self. She laughed. It sounded like a branch snapping in winter. Incompetent, she read aloud. They're saying the woman who manages $100 million construction budgets can't balance a checkbook. She tossed the file back. They're desperate, Alexandria. Narcissists don't go to court unless they've run out of options. They hate records. They hate judges. They hate anything they can't charm or bully. They want the money. Nathan owes $65,000. No. Olivia leaned forward, her eyes hard. If they just wanted 65 grand, they'd have guilt-tripped you for 6 months. They'd have sold the boat, borrowed against the house again. Filing for guardianship is nuclear. It invites scrutiny. It invites the state into their finances. She pressed her intercom. Send in the team. 2 minutes later, 3 associates walked in, carrying laptops. They didn't look like accountants. They looked like hackers in expensive suits. Olivia stood and walked to the whiteboard. We're not just defending you against a competency claim. We're performing a hostile audit. If Victor and Deborah want to tell a judge they're the responsible parties and you're the liability, we're going to open their books. She turned to me. I need everything. Old tax returns, trust documents, the address of every property they've ever owned. I gave her the access codes I'd kept from when I used to handle their finances during college. The Social Security numbers I'd memorized from helping them file insurance claims. Information I never thought I'd weaponize. I watched her team start pulling threads. Numbers scrolled across screens. Credit scores, mortgage liens, credit card balances. Find me the anomaly, Olivia ordered. Find me why they're so terrified of losing control they'd try to lock up their own daughter. The room hummed with cooling fans and typing. I sat there drinking bitter black coffee someone had placed in front of me. I wasn't the victim anymore. I was the client, and I'd just hired the shark. It took 3 hours to find the lie. The sun had climbed higher in the sky, and I'd paced the room 20 times, drunk 2 cups of coffee that tasted like regret and determination. Then the typing stopped. One of the associates, a young guy with tired eyes, printed a single document. He didn't say anything, just walked over and handed it to Olivia. She read it. Her expression didn't change, but something shifted in her eyes. When she looked up at me, the predator's gaze had softened into something that looked terrifyingly like pity. Alexandria. Sit down. I sat. The leather felt cold. Who owns the house in Naperville? My parents. They bought it in 1998. They bought it in 98, Olivia corrected. But they don't own it. Not anymore. She slid the paper across. Property Tax History Report. Look at the transfer date. May 12th, 10 years ago, my grandmother, Eleanor's death date. The deed was transferred, Olivia said, her voice steady and quiet, from Victor and Deborah to the Eleanor Trust. I don't understand. Dad said Grandma died without a will. He said everything went to probate to pay medical debts. He lied. Olivia leaned forward. There was a will. There was a trust. I just pulled the filing from the county clerk's public archives. They're required to keep copies even if the executor tries to bury them. Your father didn't probate the estate. He suppressed the will and appointed himself executor and trustee. My heart slammed against my ribs. The trust documents name a single beneficiary. She paused. It's you. The room tilted. The house, the remaining portfolio. It was all left to you. Your father was supposed to transfer the title to your name when you turned 25. He didn't. He buried the paperwork. He's been living in your house, rent-free, for 4 years past the legal deadline. Everything clicked into place with the force of a wrecking ball. The panic in their eyes, the desperation, the guardianship petition. It wasn't about Nathan's $65,000 gambling debt. That was just the match. The real gasoline was that I'd turn 30 next month. In many trusts, a 10-year audit is automatic. They knew the clock was ticking. They're not trying to declare you incompetent because they think you're crazy, Olivia said, her voice hard as diamond. They're trying to do it because if you're legally incapacitated, your father remains trustee indefinitely. He keeps the house, he keeps the secret, he keeps the control. I stood up, walked to the window, looked out at the city I'd helped build, the life I'd constructed from nothing while believing I was a burden to them. All those years, I thought I was paying rent on my existence. In reality, they were the squatters. I turned back to Olivia. The confusion was gone. All that was left was cold blue flame. They're living in my house. Yes. And they tried to cage me to keep it. Yes. Then let's go to court, I said, and burn it down. Olivia glanced at her watch and picked up her phone. The 9 a.m. hearing was just a preliminary appearance. I'm calling the clerk to request an emergency continuance to this afternoon. We need time to file our counter motion with this evidence. She dialed, spoke briefly with someone at the courthouse, then hung up. We're on for 2 p.m. That gives us 3 hours to prepare. Later that afternoon, we arrived at the Daly Center for the rescheduled hearing. Courtroom 402 was a windowless box that smelled of floor wax and anxiety, with beige acoustic tiles and fluorescent lights that made everyone look slightly sick. My parents sat on the left side. They dressed for their roles as heartbroken saviors. Mom wore a soft blue cardigan, sympathy costume, and dabbed at dry eyes with a tissue. Nathan sat beside her looking bored, checking his watch like he had somewhere better to be once they'd legally seized my life. Their lawyer, a guy named Pierce in a suit that cost more than my first year of college, opened with a performance. He painted me as tragic, used words like unhinged and manic spending and paranoid delusions, told the judge my sudden freezing of assets was proof of a break from reality, a cry for help from a woman who'd lost her grip. I sat with my hands folded, spine straight against the hard chair, didn't flinch, just watched them perform their little play. Olivia leaned close. Her voice was low steel. Look at them, Alexandria. Really look. If we hadn't found those files, if we'd walked in here empty-handed, you'd be in a medicated facility by Friday. They'd have you on sedatives by the weekend. Nathan would be driving your car to the casino by Monday. She paused. They weren't just going to take your money. They were going to hollow you out and wear your life like a costume. The image hit me like a physical blow. That alternate reality wasn't just unfair, it was a horror movie, the total erasure of myself. But that fear didn't make me tremble. It solidified me, turned my blood to liquid nitrogen. Pierce finished his speech looking smug, like he'd already won. Miss Chen, the judge said, looking at Olivia, do you have a response regarding your client's mental state? Olivia stood. She didn't pick up medical records. She picked up the deed. Your Honor, she said, her voice projecting to the back of the room, we're not here to discuss my client's mental state. We're here to discuss the petitioner's criminal intent. We move to dismiss this petition on grounds of unclean hands and fraud upon the court. The judge frowned. The petitioners claim they're concerned parents, Olivia continued, walking toward the bench. In reality, they're squatters who've been illegally occupying my client's property for 10 years. She placed the documents on the judge's bench. The silence was sudden and absolute, like all the oxygen had been sucked out of the room. Exhibit A, the last will and testament of Eleanor Vance, suppressed by the petitioner, Victor Vance. Exhibit B, the deed to the property at 1412 Oakwood Drive, held in trust. The sole beneficiary is the respondent, Alexandria Vance. The petitioners have been concealing this asset to live rent-free in a multi-million-dollar home that belongs to the woman they're trying to declare incompetent. I watched the judge read, saw his eyebrows draw together, then his face hardened. He looked up at my father. My parents' faces turned the color of old ash. the smugness drained from Nathan's expression, replaced by slack-jawed realization, a man watching his meal ticket burn. "Mr. Pierce," the judge said, his voice dangerously quiet, "are your clients aware they're currently residing in the respondent's property without a lease while hiding her inheritance?" Pierce stammered, looked at my parents, saw the guilt written across their panic. He closed his briefcase. "Your Honor, I was not informed of this." Petition for guardianship is dismissed with prejudice. The judge's gavel came down like a gunshot. Furthermore, I'm referring this matter to the state's attorney for immediate investigation into trust fraud and perjury. Get out of my courtroom! My mother started to wail, a real sound of terror this time. Victor slumped in his chair. Nathan looked at me, eyes wide with shock. I didn't look back. I stood up, smoothed my skirt, and walked out. The air in the hallway was cool and clean. The war was over. From the courthouse, I didn't celebrate with champagne. I drove straight to Naperville, my hands steady on the wheel for the 40-minute drive south. The house loomed at the end of the cul-de-sac, a sprawling monument to their deception. It looked different to me now, not my childhood home, a crime scene. I walked up the driveway, didn't ring the doorbell, didn't need to. I owned the door. My father opened it before I could reach the handle. He looked 20 years older than he had that morning, smelled of defeat and scotch. "Alexandria," he started, voice cracking. "We can explain. We were just trying to protect the asset for you." I didn't let him finish the lie. I handed him the manila envelope. "This is your official notice to vacate. You have 30 days. Locks will be changed November 1st at noon. If anything is missing, a light fixture, a painting, a single spoon, I will press charges for theft." The sheriff has a copy of the inventory list I had prepared this morning. Mom stood in the hallway, weeping into her hands. Nathan was behind her with a duffel bag, looking like a trapped animal. "And you," I said, looking at my brother, "you're not a tenant. You don't have a lease. You're a guest who overstayed his welcome by a decade. You don't get 30 days. You have 30 minutes. "Where am I supposed to go?" he whined, entitlement still clinging to him like cheap cologne. "I don't know," I said. "Maybe you can bet on it." I turned and walked back to my car. Through the rearview mirror, I watched Nathan throw his duffel bag into his beat-up Honda and peel out of the driveway. He didn't look back. Neither did I. Back in my penthouse that evening, the city was quiet. The wind off Lake Michigan had died down to nothing. I sat at my desk and opened my laptop one last time, pulled up that spreadsheet. Family liabilities, $214,000. I looked at the number. For years, that number had been a chain, proof of my love, metric of my exploitation. I highlighted the row. I didn't try to collect it, didn't send an invoice. I hit delete. The screen went blank. It wasn't forgiveness. It was a write-off. A bad debt cleared from the books so the company could finally become profitable. I closed the laptop. The silence in the room wasn't lonely anymore. It was peaceful. I wasn't just a survivor. I was the architect. And for the first time in my life, the blueprint was entirely mine. 3 months later, my parents moved out 2 days before the deadline, taking only what was legally theirs. The state's attorney filed criminal charges for trust fraud, and after a plea deal, my father received 2 years of probation and was permanently barred from serving as an executor or trustee. Nathan disappeared. Last I heard, he was living with a friend 3 states away. We haven't spoken since that day, and I don't expect we ever will. If you've ever had to buy your own freedom from the people who were supposed to protect you, share this story. You're not alone, and you're stronger than the chains they tried to keep you in. Before you go, here's a quick bonus for sticking around. If you love learning and growing like I do, you need to try audiobooks. I've got an exclusive deal with Audible. Your first month is completely free. That's access to over 500,000 titles, 0 cost to you. All the details are waiting in the description. Don't miss this one.